How does the lens I'm looking at life through shape my current lived experience? Not someday, not when everything is figured out, but right now. Because what quietly changes as we age isn't just our energy or our priorities. It's the lens itself, what we focus on, the way we interpret what matters. If you felt that inner shift with age, this conversation is for you. Welcome to the Got Life channel. I'm Robin Hills, and this episode continues our exploration of conscious aging. In the last video, we explored what happens when striving lessens and identity loosens. Today, we're naming what that shift actually is. Well, first, it's definitely not a crisis, but it is a developmental milestone that often shows up in the second half of life. You see, by midlife, most of us have spent decades building an identity in an attempt to stay relevant. And then this unexpected shift happens. The old motivators just stop working. And not because we've suddenly lost our drive or become apathetic, but because the ego has done the job it was designed to do. Now, when I say ego, I'm not referring to a big-headed person who is arrogant, who has a big ego. I'm referring to the identity we all construct to survive, belong, and succeed in the world. It's also called the mind-made self, which begins to develop as soon as we're born. Richard Barrett describes this inner shift as a natural transition, a shift from an ego-based lens to a soul-based lens. For example, when you find yourself saying, "I just don't care what people think anymore," it's really your ego relaxing its grip. And when you say simple pleasures finally matter, it's your soul redefining what has value. Now, before defining the soul, Barrett ran an experiment, simple but unforgettable. During his presentations, he asked his audience to first stand up if you have a car. Most people stood. Stand up if you have a job. A few sat down. Stand up if you have a body. Everyone stood. Then he paused. Remain standing if you are a body. Everyone sat down. Stand up if you are a mind, and no one stood. Then he said, stand up if you are a soul. Every single person stood up. The results of his experiment show that people instinctively know the difference between what they have and what they are. When Barrett talks about the soul, how he defines it is the higher self that expresses our unique pattern of awareness beyond our roles, our mind, and our personality. So let's differentiate between ego and soul. On the one hand, the ego forms so we can adapt to the world. The ego asks questions like, how do I succeed? How can I matter? On the other hand, the soul expresses itself in more subtle ways, coming from a deeper place that feels meaningful and aligned. It asks questions like, what is mine to give? And what wants to be expressed through me? Now, the ego doesn't disappear as we mature, much as we wish it would at times, but it can learn to be in service to the soul. That's why, as the soul begins to lead later in life, the old motivators just stop working. Not because they were wrong, just because they were temporary. And as our motivation shifts, so do our values. What Barrett noticed first during his research was a particular pattern that eventually led to his theory. when he asked thousands of people what exactly guides their daily decisions, people's values clustered around security, status, and approval earlier in life. Later in life, though, meaning, compassion, and service emerged. He then mapped this evolution through 7 levels of consciousness, but experientially, let's condense it down to 3 stages. First, ego development, then ego-soul alignment, and finally, soul activation. And when we enter this final stage of soul activation, something profound happens. We move from placing ourselves at the center of life, which we've done most of our lives, to placing life itself at the center. When the soul, not the ego, begins to take charge, our focus widens to include genuine concern for others. The desire to serve just no longer feels like an obligation, something we have to do, but arises naturally with the shift in focus. And guess what? That, my friend, is one of the clearest signals that your soul is leading. The shift from me to we is essential to finishing ourselves. Yet for most of us, it takes a lifetime to discover that the joy we've been searching for could never be found while the mind-made self, the ego, was running the show. So here's your homework. Ask yourself the question we started with. How does the lens I'm looking at life through shape my current lived experience? And how has that lens changed over the last 5 to 10 years? You may want to examine your motivation and values to find the answers. Because when the soul begins to lead, our hearts soften. And living from the soul begins with gentleness toward ourselves.